and welcome to Raising the Standards. Jacoby with you. It's me, myself, I, and Billy. We were.
How many does that make us?
That makes about 9 of us. Bill Wolverton joining me. I'm delighted to be in the studio with him, and good show today as we wrap up. It seems like the longest holidays in a long time. It seems like, what day is it now? And it just kept with Christmas being on a Thursday.
I agree. I had to remind myself what day of the week it was this morning.
Yeah, it was amazing. Anyway, delighted to have you. This is a show that we planned to do celebrating the 110th birth anniversary of Frank Sinatra, which was on December 12th. And we've had some technical problems, just some bad luck, and we weren't able to put it together. And we're delighted that our guests today have been very kind and very patient. For a few moments, we'll be talking Charles Granata, who's an historian and an author and producer of a show called Sinatra's Standard Time on Jazz 88 in San Diego. Chat with him about Frank. And then our old friend Tom Dreesen, who of course opened for Frank for 14 years.
Wow.
Talked to Tom at the bottom of the hour. And did you have a good holiday?
I did.
Good.
I did. Christmas itself I spent with my boys. We went to see a movie, and then we went to dinner. And
What did you see?
I can't remember the title of it. It's about a ping pong player.
You saw, my wife saw this the other day, Marty Supreme.
That's it. For some reason I have a mental block against the name.
Did you love it?
I did enjoy the movie, yeah.
I've heard it's gotten great reviews. Timothy
it's well
Chalamet.
over 2 hours, and yet it was engaging.
Well, as Roger Ebert once said, a good movie is never too long and a bad movie is never too short.
I wouldn't argue with that.
People say to me, well, it's 3 hours. It's a movie. Just sit down and watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I recommend it.
Yeah. Good.
How about you?
I watched a film on Netflix last night with Colin Farrell called...
you and Colin watched it. Nice.
Yeah, it was nice, he and I. It was called A Ballad of a Small Player, I believe.
Huh.
Fascinating. And it's kind of ghosts and stuff. And there was an old film called The Cooler. And I don't know if you ever saw that. That was William Macy. And a cooler actually exists. It's a guy in Las Vegas that the company will send down when you're on a hot street, and he's just a jinx.
Really?
Yeah, and they actually exist.
Well, now,
and if he stands
do they
next
cheat?
To you, no, they would just stand next to you, and they're just bad luck. And it's I don't know.
How do you get that gig?
Yeah. It's and how do they pay you for it?
I had a professor
I'm sure the check wouldn't clear.
I had a professor who went to Vegas and won at 21 when they had developed a system before people were aware of those things, and they just had a single deck,
The old days where you could.
Yeah. So when they started cleaning out the casino, they would switch dealers and they would just cheat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then they made no bones about it.
Yeah. That's funny. Did you play blackjack casinos much?
I haven't played a lot, but I've played some. Yeah.
I would never play with a male dealer. That was part of my deal. And I love single decks. The problem was I don't count cards, but having the 5 decks, I don't want to see 7 aces in a row.
No.
That makes me very
No, my project for my senior project when I graduated with a math degree was teaching a system to win at blackjack.
Yeah. Indeed. You know what we're going to do? Let's get some business out of the way while we're waiting to hear from Charles. Oh, he's there now. Well, let's talk. With us on the line, Charles Granata. Charles, you there, buddy?
He should be.
Hello.
Hey, Charles. Michael, how are you, buddy?
Good. I'm here. How are you guys doing?
Well, we are fine. Say hello to Bill.
Howdy.
Hi, Bill.
So I was, I don't know if you heard my intro, but Lord knows we've had a little bit of tough sledding to get this show on the air. And you have been wonderfully patient, as has Tom Dreesen, in waiting for us to put it all together. But we are together now, and I'm delighted as we belatedly celebrate the 110th birth anniversary of Frank Sinatra. Now, you are an historian, an author, and you do a show for, is it Jazz 88 in San Diego?
Yes, KSDS FM,
Okay.
Jazz 88.3, which is their public radio jazz station.
Okay. Tell me about the show.
The show is called Sinatra Standard Time, and it's not strictly a Sinatra show. I wanted to do something that was different and build on Sinatra's predilection for gravitating towards the standards. So I decided to do a show that includes Sinatra, but is not exclusively Frank. So I do include other vocalists, and that really does span a very wide swath of artists. And I also include a lot of instrumental jazz, modern jazz, some bebop, big band. I wanted to really mix it up and unify it with songs from the American Songbook.
Well,
it's Sinatra Standard Time.
It's interesting, Charles. Michael Feinstein's a friend of ours and a regular guest on the show, and we've often talked about the fact that the Great American Songbook didn't end with Gershwin. That it's it's constantly evolving. And Billy Joel and coming up to the last 20, 30 years are that book keeps getting added to.
Absolutely. I always say on my show that we celebrate and we feature the American song books, plural, right, simply because I divide it into the Great American Songbook, the traditional songbook, and the contemporary songbook, which includes, as you say, Billy Joel, Paul Simon, Elton John. Neil Sedaka would fall into that category. People like Paul Williams and Jimmy Webb and on, because they really have written what, we consider to be the standards of the last half of the 20th century, for sure.
It's interesting that people say, well, why is Sinatra associated with so many, great songs? And, of course, he's Frank. But beyond that, during World War II, since he wasn't in the service and he was doing Hit Parade, so many of those songs were introduced by him.
That is true. I like to think that Sinatra really came along at the right time. He was the right voice for the right moment. He came along at a moment when many of the great songs were being written for stage and screen, but also at a time during the war when people were looking for a comforting voice. And as many of those songs were written because of the war, if you think of songs like I'll Be Seeing You, it had a lot to do with people missing their loved ones who were overseas and fighting on our behalf. So, those were songs that were being written as Sinatra was on his upward climb. And of course, that voice was just the perfect and most comforting voice of all. So it's not surprising that those songs really were well suited to him and became the standards that they did, many in large part because Sinatra embraced them.
And it's interesting because when people hear the original versions of many of these tunes, which came from Tin Pan Alley and Broadway, there's such different approach to it. And if you're used to hearing Sinatra doing The Way You Look Tonight, it is profoundly different than when Fred Astaire introduced it.
That is correct as well. I'm very close to Michael Feinstein, mm-hmm, and we've discussed this. I think people are surprised sometimes to hear the original tempo of Embraceable You, which was written as a mid-tempo song. And, it wasn't until later with vocalists such as Lee Wiley and Frank Sinatra that they took songs like Embraceable You and I've Got a Crush on You, obviously, both two of the most famous Gershwin standards, and slowed them down and made them more romantic and turned them into these beautiful ballads that became evergreens.
There's a great story about when Sinatra recorded In the Still of the Night, of course, the great Cole Porter tune, that Porter didn't like his version of it, and Frank said, "Tell him not to cash the checks."
Yeah. That's funny, and that works both ways because Frank very publicly stated his disdain for Strangers in the Night.
Yeah.
And someone once said, have you mailed any of the royalties back? So It does work both ways. But, I've heard this said many times. I think Sammy Kahn might have said this to me too. A song never had a better friend than Frank Sinatra. And I
absolutely.
think that's true.
And Bill, I don't know if you know this story. I'm going to interrupt for a second. I told Charles this story the other day that there's a great story about Sinatra took Lena Horne to the Stork Club in the 40s when the Stork Club was still segregated. And he said to the maitre d', I got a reservation for Sinatra. And the poor guy didn't know what to do because he was segregated. He looked at her, he looked at Lena, and looked at Frank, and finally he said, who made your reservation? Mm-hmm. And Frank said, Lincoln.
That's good.
That's so good.
My dad had a crush on Lena Horne.
Oh, who didn't?
Yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful woman. Talk a little bit about, speaking about Sinatra books, of course, Tom Dreesen, who was with him, and we'll chat with him in a little while, for 14 years. If the Kitty Kelly book was a little weird, but a couple of, I think it's 2 or 3 volumes, the Kaplan book, James Kaplan, have you read those?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, those are absolutely. We had him on the show, and just terrific.
Yeah, that's the definitive full study of Sinatra in terms of a biography. My book is very different. Sessions with Sinatra, Frank Sinatra, and the Art of Recording is a very narrow study of how he planned and executed his recordings. And what I did is I took a niche that wasn't filled. I like to say that I had to write the book that I wanted to read. And that is blending both the art and science of what's behind a 3-minute record. Yeah. And I did it, through the Sinatra method of picking songs and arrangers and going into the studio. And I interwove the technology and how it grew with Sinatra during his lifetime, which it did. He went from wax recording in the late 30s right up to digital fiber optic recording, where 2 people could do a duet, and they weren't even in the same studio in the early 90s. So he really spanned an incredible breadth of technological advances in the recording arts, and I thought that was an interesting study, at least for me.
Now I'm going
and of course, there's Will Friedwald's
book, right, that breaks down every album.
The Song Is really. Yeah, that's, to me, the definitive musical study of Frank overall as a musician and, the artistic choices that he made and so forth. So, yeah, there are a lot of great books. And I also loved, Pete Hamill's Why Sinatra Matters.
One of the great books. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I mean, that came, when I got to know Pete Hamill and had dinner with him a few times. Excuse me, my dogs are a little crazy here.
They're after us, so I understand.
Yeah, he was a genuine fan. He absolutely adored Frank's work. And of course, Pete had such a great writing style and a great perspective that book just really shines in my estimation.
There is, Charles, I'm sure you've read it, another Pete Hamill book, although many, but called A Drinking Life, which is a terrific read. Hey, let me ask you this.
That's a great book.
I'm going to take a shot in the dark since, unlike myself, with no musical talent whatsoever, I have a feeling you've got a little music in your background.
I do. As a young child, I took piano and drum lessons, and of course played in the high school marching band and concert band and orchestra. I really loved percussion and drums. I didn't stick with it, though. I had this fear of performing in front of people, and I just didn't feel comfortable doing that, or I probably would have become a professional musician.
Now, being a parent, I'm gonna also make a guess that you had the drums first, and they talked you into the piano.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. Yes, I started playing the drums in 5th grade. I remember very clearly. I was 10 years old, and then Right around the same time, we got a piano, and my aunt was a piano teacher, and she was elected to teach me. But I was an incorrigible pupil. I just, I was not wired for the kind of practice and the rote playing of the elemental things like Duvernoy and other popular piano books. So I definitely had ADD as a child.
Yeah.
So I think that's why the drums were really suited for me.
Now, tell me, folks, you mentioned the show Standard Sinatra Time. How can folks hear that? Obviously, you're streaming, and they can also hear it broadcast in the San Diego area as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, today's technology. All you need to do is sign on to jazz88.org, jazz88.org, from an iPhone or any smartphone or your computer, and it takes you right to the station's website, and it says right on the opening, stream live. So my show, Sinatra Standard Time, airs on Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific Time, and that's 5 to 7 Eastern, obviously. And you could either listen live if you're in San Diego. You can tune in on your radio. It's 88.3 FM. You can go to jazz88.org and listen live while it's airing online. And the nice thing is that they archive every one of the shows, and they do that for all of the hosts on Jazz 88. That includes Lauren Schoenberg and Will Friedwald and Billy Vera and so many other great hosts. And you can just navigate to the Sinatra Standard Time page or my personal page on the jazz88.org website, and you can listen to any show of mine or the other hosts going back to the beginning.
No, terrific.
Yeah, and if our listeners missed any of that, the description of our podcast is going to have a link to the page with 65 of your past episodes on it.
Yeah, so that'll be great.
Oh,
and,
great!
It's like
wonderful.
It's a living legacy.
Yep.
Hey,
well, that's the big benefit of public radio is that you can do things that you can't do with regular radio. Obviously, when I say regular radio, I mean it is terrestrial radio, but there are definitely advantages to being a public outlet. They got the funding to have an archive where people can just go in and listen to any show from any time at will, because of the generosity of certain donors who underwrote that project. So that's a wonderful thing that you would never see on a standard station, I don't think.
Well, partner, I really appreciate you taking time. Very quickly, you and I got contacted together by Josh, whom you work with, who are the folks who've seen it on Facebook, have released the Hollywood Bowl tapes of Sinatra from the early 40s, I think, through 46, which I'm about to play a cutoff of. Tell me real quickly about that group. I believe it's called, what is it called, Play?
It's called Sing Music. And they're actually a very interesting business model. They're a blockchain company that releases music. And in this case, they consulted with me and asked what they might be able to bring out that would be important and historic and in need of preservation. More importantly, sharing so people could enjoy it. And I immediately thought of the Hollywood Bowl recordings, which were made for Armed Forces Radio, broadcast in the 40s, and then basically, just left to kind of molder. No one really took them and dusted them off and did anything significant with them. And Sing got all the appropriate legal clearances and engaged me to consult on the project and write the liner notes. And I'm really proud of this. And I'm proud that Sing was able to do it, because this really is an important missing piece of the Sinatra canon. There's a lot of recordings of Frank on stage that were made in the 50s and 60s and 70s, 80s, into the 90s. but there's very little live material from the 1940s. So we have 3 concerts from the Hollywood Bowl that really illustrate what it would have been like to hear Frank at the beginning and the formative a period in his career in the 1940s. And I just think it's like, to me, it's like part of the Holy Grail, and it's a piece of the puzzle that's been missing for years. So, Sing did a box set. They did an individual CD. They did a Christmas CD of his radio performances. But this really is a magnificent package with some very important Sinatra recordings.
Well, as we thank you, my friend, and kudos for your involvement in that and sharing the legacy, Charles Granata, and let's put together. We'll chat down the road. Love to chat some more with you. And
Absolutely,
talk more about
Mike. You can call on me anytime. You can wind me up, and I'll talk about music.
Absolutely.
So,
Well,
anything you need, I'm there.
All right, my friend. Here's a little something from the Hollywood Bowl from the 40s. I should care, and we do care, and we do thank you, Charles. Take care, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Mike.
I should care. I should go around weeping. I should care. I should go without sleeping. Strangely enough, I sleep well, except for a dream or two. But then I count my sheep well. Funny how sheep can lull you to sleep, so I should care. I should let it upset me. I should care. But it just doesn't get me. Maybe I won't find someone as lovely as you, but I should care, and I do.
From 1942 at the Hollywood Bowl, Frank Sinatra and I Should Care. Oh, that's lovely. Let's do a little business and hopefully talk Tom Dreesen, just a couple.
Sounds perfect.
You're listening to Santa Cruz Voice and raising the standards, the internet's finest hour anywhere.
Too much stuff? Clean it out, pack it up, and drive it to your door at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24/7 security. Drive it to the door and store it at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
Having a new job in Texas and have to move? Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul has the moving vans, car trailers, and shipping boxes you need ready to go. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
We've all heard the story of the 3 little pigs. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Yes, your home can definitely be built weak or it's time to repair or remodel. Well, here at Knox Roofing, we can surely help you with getting that roof of yours prepared for the big bad wolf or Mother Nature's anger. Whether it be fire, high winds, hail, snow, or maybe just a doggone wet winter ahead of us, call Knox Roofing. We're here for you. Here at Knox Roofing, we have every type of roof out there for you. Skylights, gutters, insulation, solar can be added to save energy as well. Financing is always available, and our guarantees and workmanship cannot be beat. Summer is here, so give us a call or stop by our showroom in Scotts Valley. The number to call is 461-0634. That's 461-0634 anytime. Okay, thanks, folks.
The IRS is knocking on the door because you owe back taxes. Don't panic. Call the tax doctor for free help getting out of IRS collections and back into the good graces of Uncle Sam. The tax doctor's service is free, and all you need to do is call 800-817-2871. That's 800-817-2871. Get free help. Call 800-817-2871.
Tune in every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. to the Zealous Podcast on SantaCruzVoice.com. I'll be your host, Rocky Snyder, and each weekly episode is an exploratory interview with the world's leading experts in strength conditioning, sport coaching, physical therapy, and athletic training. You can hear how these professionals keep athletes in peak performance in the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, Major League Soccer, and the NBA. That's every Saturday at 8 a.m. on SantaCruzVoice.com.
And welcome back to Raising the Standards as we pay a belated observance of Frank Sinatra's 110th birth anniversary. With us on the line, an old friend and someone who knew Frank so very well, the wonderful Tom Dreesen. Hi, Tommy. How are you?
I'm fine, Michael. I don't know how wonderful. How wonderful I am, but thank you for that introduction. I'm fine, Michael. How you doing?
I'm doing well. You're like myself, as my guess. You're not playing golf today. You got the big storm down there?
Yeah, it's raining here. It's going to rain here for the next 4 or 5 days, I think. The guy across the street is building an ark.
Yeah, indeed.
A little bit presumptuous,
Well, it's. Have you seen? Excuse me. There's a thing on Netflix, the Paul Anka documentary.
I haven't seen it, but I've been, I've been told about it.
And
everybody's telling me to watch it.
Well,
I talked to Paul about 2 months ago. We had a short chat.
Well, it's funny, Tom. A buddy of mine who's a jazz singer, I was telling him about the documentary, and he described Anka as a diminutive Buddy Rich. I said, other than that, how was the reputation? But it's well worth watching, and there's a great line by Frankie Avalon. They're sitting together, and Avalon says, "I thought that getting old would take much longer."
Yeah, that's a good line.
Yeah,
that's right. I took Frankie one time. I was in New York with Frank Sinatra, and we were doing shows. We were performing at Radio City Music Hall, and so we were going to dinner that night. Right after the show, Frank said we were going to dinner at some place, and Frankie Avalon was in town, and I said, "Oh, you know what, Frankie Avalon, my buddy, is in town." He said, "Oh, I know Frankie. I said, "Do you mind if I bring him?" He said, "No, I don't mind at all." And I'm glad I brought him because it was a wonderful evening. And after dinner, they start talking about making the sauce.
Right, the gravy.
We call it, Italians called it gravy. In the old days. So Frankie cooks every Sunday for his 8 children. At that time, they're all home, and he makes the gravy and all that stuff. So they start talking, Frank Sinatra and him, about how Frank likes to make it and how Frankie likes to make it. It was very interesting. Then they start talking about singing and different styles, and I was fascinated. It was just a wonderful evening and a great conversation.
One of the things I was going to ask you, and I'm about to, about misconceptions about Frank, but since you brought it up, was he as good a cook as people say?
You know what? He would go into the kitchen and with the chef, and he would on Sundays I would watch him. He'd go in there and he would help make the sauce, the gravy, and he would talk to the chef. And when he wanted to eat, he would, like, when you put oil in the pan, he would put garlic in the pan, but then remove it shortly thereafter. He put it in just for flavor. He didn't leave it in. He had these little idiosyncrasies about the way he liked food prepared. And when we had house guests there, and I was there, I used to stay there 6-7 times a year at his compound in Rancho Mirage, and he had all the bungalows, on the outer perimeter, all loaded with house guests. So when the chef was in there cooking, Frank would go in the kitchen several times to check what the chef, and this was a top-notch chef, of course, and he would check to see what he's doing and check on him because he wanted things prepared a certain way,
Did you have told the story on the program before, and I appreciate that we keep regular visits with you because I just love your work and love hearing these great stories, not only about Frank, but about your career. But give us the quick dog and pony show about how it all came together with Sinatra and you.
I had been touring after my first appearance on the Tonight Show. I'll digress a little bit. I was with the comedy team for 6 years. Tim Reed and I were America's first black and white comedy team, and history shows we were the last. There's never been one since. That was 50 years ago. And when that team split up, Tim wanted to be more of an actor, and he later on, as you know, became Venus Flytrap on WKRP. He was on many sitcoms. And so anyhow, I ended up on the West Coast, struggling, made it to the Comedy Store, started trying to audition for the Tonight Show, finally got the Tonight Show, and my whole life changed. From that time on, immediately Sammy Davis Jr. took me on the road with him. And so I started touring with Sammy Davis and Smokey Robinson and Natalie Cole and Gladys Knight and the Pips and Frankie Avalon. And I toured together under contract at the Claridge Hotel in Atlantic City. And
you there?
Doing shows together.
Okay.
All these different artists, James Darren, all these singers hire me because they had family audiences. And doing all the Tonight Shows, you had the right material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. So I had a wealth of material that I was always writing the material to do on the Tonight Show and all the talk shows, because there wasn't cable TV in those days, and you couldn't say go to hell on television. You couldn't say damn, So the singers are hiring me. Now, while I'm touring with Smokey Robinson, I'm in Lake Tahoe, and Frank Sinatra was appearing at Harrah's Hotel. And I had worked Harrah's many times with Sammy and with Mac Davis. Anyhow, so I'm there for like a week, and there was and now to
kind of losing you there, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. So you're playing Tahoe.
I'm playing Tahoe. Frank Sinatra's at Harrah's Hotel. I called him ATV one night, and I picked this specific night. Why, I don't know. And he said, "Oh yeah, Tom, come on over, and we'll take care of you." After my show at Caesars with Smokey, I rush off stage out the side door, run over to Harrah's Casino. I'm running into the casino, and because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. Frank Sinatra created more excitement walking to a microphone than most performers do with their whole act. I had seen him in concert in arenas, and when he walked out on stage, the room was electrified. It was unbelievable, without singing a note, yet the standing ovation and how the crowd would react to him. And I didn't want to miss that. So I'm running into the showroom, and the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, was talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar right outside the showroom, and he saw me, and he said, "Tommy, come here." And I reluctantly went over there. He said, "Tommy, this is Mickey Rubin." Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer. And he said, "Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen, and I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra." And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face, like he heard that a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? I said, "Mr. Rubin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? He started laughing.
I love it.
And he said, "Oh, I like this kid." I made him laugh. And a week later, they called me and said, "Would you like to do a week with Frank Sinatra at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City?"
Wow.
And I said, "Yeah." And I thought, "Gee, this is great. I'll get my picture taken with him. I'll hang it in every bar back in Chicago, and my life is fulfilled, But the second night I was with him, he and his wife Barbara took me out to dinner, and I can remember like it was yesterday. In the middle of dinner, he set his knife and his fork down, and I was across the table from him. He looked at me and he said, "I like your material, and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested." And I didn't say, "Let me check my calendar." I said, "Yeah, And it turned into 14 years of 45, 50 cities a year, and arenas all over the country, and a friendship that I'll always treasure, and I miss him every day of my life.
I'm with my buddy Bill here in the studio. You a Sinatra fan, Bill?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with it, but Tom's stories are making me sorry I never saw him live myself.
Yeah. Well, it's. I'll digress for 1 second, Tom, with your remark about the $50,000. It's a great story that I just recently heard since his passing. Bob Uecker, when he was apparently coming out of high school, and the St. Louis Cardinal scout came to his parents and said, "We'd like to sign your son for $5,000," and his dad said, "We haven't got that kind of money."
Yeah. By the way, I did Tonight Shows with Bob Uecker. Bob Uecker was a good
He
buddy.
was a funny man.
He made me laugh so hard. Uecker, we do the Tonight Show, and Bob Uecker, when you finish your spot, I finished my stand-up, I'd go sit down. Uecker had already been on, so you move down the couch.
Right.
I'd sit down, and Uecker would say something to make me laugh. Well, after I finished my conversation with Johnny, I would move down and the next guest would come on. And Uecker would make me laugh, and Fred DeCorda would be sitting not too far from him, and he'd point his finger at me. Stop it. You're upstaging the guest that's currently on. But Uecker would have a deadpan face. And I told him one time, I said, "Hey, Uecker, you don't need this show. I need this show. You're getting me in trouble here." So anyhow, he always would say something to make me laugh. Now, one night, I did my monologue. It went real well. I sat down, and Uecker's next to me, and I stayed with Johnny. And Uecker was trying. He was going in my ear, and trying. And I was so happy with myself that I didn't let him break me up. Right. Yeah. Now, the next guest, I moved down the couch. Johnny Carson's introducing the next guest was a guy that had been in prison for 25 years. He wrote a book called Too Dangerous to Be at Large, because that's what the judge told him when he sentenced him to life imprisonment. He was the only man ever to escape from Folsom Prison, maximum security prison. And so Carson, he now was a security guy for the McDonald's Corporation. Carson's introducing him. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, blah, 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 25 years in prison, the only man to escape from maximum security Folsom Prison. Would you welcome, please?" And the guy's name, I forgot his name, like Don Johnson or something like that. As he was walking toward me, to shake my hand, Uecker whispered in my ear, "Did you leave your wallet in the dressing room?" And I broke up. Yeah. I laughed in this guy's face. Now the guy's getting angry with me.
Yeah, yeah.
And DeCordo's pointing his finger, and Uecker's got a deadpan look on his face, but I'm choking laughing so hard. Finally, the guy turned around and said to me, "Hey, buddy, you okay?" I said, "Yeah." Yeah. I thought he was going to strangle me on the couch, but Uecker was somebody else.
Tommy, talk a little bit about, obviously, there have been a handful of people who have regularly opened for Sinatra. The progression, because I saw Sinatra many times in Lake Tahoe at Harrah's and dinner at the Summit, which was then the Health Club. It was just such a great place. And it was such a great room, as you know, having played there. But Pat Henry was with him for years. I saw him, I think in San Francisco, Gary Shandling, of all people, opened for him. In that progression, you came in, obviously, after Henry, but what year did you start?
Yeah, I started in 1982, but Pat was also a real good friend of mine. I just really like Pat so much. Pat was a table comedian. He could make you laugh far more off stage than he did on stage. He had a set routine on stage. And one of the reasons, after Pat passed away, Frank tried several different comedians. He was trying out different comedians, but he wanted somebody that would keep coming up with new material.
Exactly.
Because we return to the same cities every year, and Pat always stayed with the same.
Yeah, you could recite it if you've seen quite a few shows.
Psychic. He predicted the exact day and the exact moment he was going to die. He said August 24th at 12:01 he died in the electric chair.
Yeah. And the one time I remember it was my wife and I still have sex twice, although I like the one in spring better than the one in summer.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyhow, so Frank was trying to, he used different people, Jan Murray, and he used Charlie Callis. And with Charlie was a funny guy, but when you open for Frank in 20,000 seat arenas, you're in the round most of the time. So there's people behind you on your left and on your right and in front of you. And Charlie, oftentimes, his expressions were where the punchline was. So the people behind him couldn't see that. So he didn't work real well in the arenas, you know. And so, again, a monologist works a lot better in the arenas. You really have to learn how to work that. That's a totally different dynamic, you know, going out and when you're in the round, because you got to work to your left, to your right, behind you, you know. And I learned several tricks to make that work, you know. And Frank, like, he would sit in the wings and listen to my material and would comment sometimes, oh, I like that new joke, or I like the new thing you said about this, that, or the other, you know.
Well, Tommy, you and I have talked about this before, and one of the many things I admire about you is, as did Frank, that you were constantly doing new material, because in the old days, as you know, you could get an act and use it for 40 years without ever changing it.
Yeah, that was before, you know, national television.
That changed everything.
I did 61 appearances. Yeah, I did 61 appearances on The Tonight Show. Every time you did The Tonight Show, you had to come up with a new 5 or 6 minutes. And Johnny didn't want two guys going to bar jokes. He wanted original monologues. You know, so I was in a constant state of writing new material. You know, and also I was also doing Johnny Carson, Mike Douglas, Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train. I'm the only white comedian to ever do Soul Train. I did American Bandstand. I was doing all these different shows, and I had to keep coming up with, you know, different material. And so it was almost, I was almost glad when I didn't have, I've got hours of material in my brain, but I was glad when it was kind of that eased off the situation, because you could become manic writing new material all the time. Everything became material. I'd be having lunch with you, and you'd say, you know, my brother told me something funny the other day, and I'd get my pen and pencil out and say, tell me what he said, you know.
Hey, take a second, Tom, if you would, as we wrap this up, to talk about your book, which is a great read and a great insight to Frank and to those years that you were together.
I wrote a book called Still Standing, and the subtitle is My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. And it's basically, and it's like my one-man show. I do a one-man show called The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. It's a 90-minute show of stand-up comedy, but also storytelling. But it's basically this little boy. I had 8 brothers and sisters. I lived in a shack. We were raggedy poor. We had no bathtub, no shower, no hot water. It wasn't during Depression. I'm not that old, but it was, you know, hard times. And that little boy shining shoes in all the bars in the south side of Chicago, and hearing Frank Sinatra on the jukebox while he's shining shoes. And and one day that little boy shining shoes on the south side of Chicago is carrying the coffin of Frank Sinatra outside of Beverly Hills, outside of a church in Beverly Hills. So it's the journey from that little kid, you know, hearing Sinatra on the jukebox to one day carrying his coffin out of a church. You know?
It's
and all the things that happen in between, the highs, the lows, the ups, the downs. You know, I've been why Still Standing. It's a double entendre. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm now, according to AI Chat, I'm the oldest male stand-up comedian in America, still doing stand-up comedies. The oldest male.
Yeah.
So I'm still standing, but also I was knocked down a lot in my life, and physically knocked down, and so that's what the book is about. I kept getting back up again.
Well,
so it's a book of triumph and.
Certainly, Tom, as they say, it's not the number of times you get knocked down, it's the number of times you get back up, and you have continued to, and we thank you for your kindness and continuing to be part of this program, and I count it as a blessing to have you as a friend, and thank you for calling. We still miss him every day, and we thank you for helping us remember.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Yeah, thanks so much. And Bill, nice to meet you. And,
thank you. Same.
Hope we'll meet again one day.
Me too.
Take care, buddy. Tom Dreesen, what a good guy. And,
Agreed.
Great stories. Let's do liner notes. Like we got time?
I do.
Needless to say, December 12th marked the 110th birth anniversary of Frank Sinatra, and it's difficult to imagine a world without him. Difficult because his music has never left us. Today we do what I do every day. we remember the voice, specifically a watershed year in Sinatra's career, 1957. 4 years after his remarkable comeback, highlighted with an Academy Award from his role as Private Maggio in From Here to Eternity, Sinatra was at his peak musically. The year featured the release of 4 Capitol albums, including Close to You, A Swinging Affair, Where Are You, and A Jolly Christmas from Frank Sinatra. In October, Pal Joey hit the big screen with a Rodgers and Hart tune that would become a Sinatra classic, The Lady is a Tramp. She gets too hungry for dinner at 8. She likes the theater and never comes late. She never bothers with people she'd hate. That's why The Lady is a Tramp. Written in 1937 for the Broadway production of Babes in Arms, the song was introduced by Mitzi Green and performed in the first person, I Get Too Hungry. In the film, Sinatra's character Joey Evans sings Tramp to socialite Rita Hayworth. The movie rendition, unlike subsequent versions, is layback and veritably dripping with satire. Hayworth was duly offended, yet ended up in Joey's arms. Who would have thought? This is quintessential Sinatra and quintessential 50s. Trust me, if you can look hip while playing an air piano, you're more than pretty good. You're simply the best. Enjoy.
She gets too hungry for dinner at 8. She likes the theater, never comes late. She'd never bother with people she'd hate. That's why the lady is a tramp. Doesn't like crap games with barons and earls. Won't go to Harlem in ermine and pearls. Won't dish the dirt with the rest of the girls. That's why the lady is a tramp. She likes the free, fresh wind in her hair. Life without care. She's broke, but it's oak. Hates California. It's cold and it's damp. That's why the lady is a tramp. She gets far too hungry to wait for dinner at 8. She adores the theater and she doesn't arrive late. She'd never bother with people she'd hate. That is why the lady is a tramp. Won't have a dice game with any barons and earls. She will never go up to Harlem dressed in ermine and pearls. Won't dish the dirt with all the other girls. That is why the lady is a tramp. She loves the free, fresh wind in her hair. Life without care. She's broke. Hates California 'cause it's so cold and so damp. That's why the lady. That's why the lady. That's why the lady is a tramp.
From the 1957 production of Pal Joey, Lady is a Tramp, Sinatra, of course. Big thank you to Charles Granada, to our buddy Tom Dreesen, as we remember Sinatra. We're going to got an A train around. It's coming. I knew it was here somewhere. Next week, Steve John from the Monterey Foundation with his annual visit talking about the AT&T. And also Lauren Monroe, we're going to welcome back.
Good.
Who is with the Raven Drum Foundation. A marvelous woman, a wonderful entertainer. She and her husband started the foundation, which works with veterans and first responders.
Right.
And he, of course, Rick Allen, was is the drummer for Def Leppard.
If I recall, they worked with some people who were gotten into a little bit of trouble.
Yes,
Yeah, and
indeed.
they helped
I think
them out.
you were on that show.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk to her again next week and talk about drum circles, which are fascinating. I'm off to New Orleans on Monday. I would talk to you and Rosie during the week.
I told her your stories are going to make me hungry when you're coming from New Orleans.
As I saw a film once that talked about New Orleans saying 400 restaurants in one menu. But it's there's an awful lot of
If it's that good, that's
and
okay.
an awful lot of redfish. And
Yeah.
it's follow Facebook. I'm going to have a whole lot of stories on that. As always, this show has been for Mark, for Georgianne, and for you. Until next Saturday at 1 o'clock, or make it noon if you don't live in Hawaii. And we once again raise the standards. Thank you, Billy, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm Jacoby. I'll see you soon.
You get to where you're going in a hurry. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Now it's coming. Can't you hear the rails go humming? If you should miss the air train, you miss the quickest way to get to Harlem.
Hello, this is Lawrence Juba. When I'm not playing my guitar, I'm listening to Good Morning Monterey Bay.